of transparency that we are going to be recording this workshop. We do post these workshops on our SMCOE LCAP webpage. We post these workshops in both their full length video as well as micro videos, depending on what you have time for. We also post the link to our slide deck so that you can have the literature as well of the information that we're sharing. Also, we do invite you to rename yourself if you'd like. We know that this is an opportunity for many of us to network, especially if we're new in this LCAP world. And so it is helpful to include some information about where we might be joining from, the district that we're associated or LEA that we're associated with. Finally, if you do have questions, please feel free to type those questions in the chat. We are going to be cognizant and try to make time between each section to address any questions that we might be receiving. We'll also have an opportunity at the end of the workshop to address questions and provide some answers. But we do want to be mindful that if you are putting questions in the chat box, that they may be recorded, as we are doing a live recording. Before we do jump into the information of this workshop, we always like to extend gratitude across our San Mateo County Office of Education for the LCAP team. We do try to incorporate various departments and teams within SMCOE because we know that through our LCAP, we are really focusing on the through line and the wraparound supports that we are providing for our students and families. And so we do want to recognize our business services, Rosalie Bowman, Vanita Singh, and Wendy Richard. Rosalie Bowman is new this year, and you may have already received some information from her. From our SELPA team, we have Natasha King and Mary Young. We know that SELPA is going to be sharing a little bit of information toward the end of this workshop. Representing our metrics, we have Jared Prolo, who is always available to answer anything metrics related or related to curriculum and instruction. For your program side, for the district leads, we have myself, Carrie Blanton, Jeff Schmidt, Joy Dardanelle, and Sharon Brown. You will be receiving quite a bit of information from us as we get into the LCAP development phase, scheduling initial meetings and feedback. To represent our multilingual learner support side, we have Jerry Lopez and Gracie Estrella. Jerry Lopez is new to the team this year. You may have already seen him. He does a lot of work around engagement with our educational partners and some support with Gracie Estrella. And then finally, our wonderful administrative support, Katharina Bautista. Katharina Bautista, you'll be receiving a lot of emails from her when it comes time to scheduling or submitting your LCAP. And she's also available just to receive any general questions that she can forward onto the team. Our outcomes for today, we have two main outcomes. The first being that we would like to share best practices for creating meaningful engagement with educational partners. And then the second is that we're going to share the requirements related to engagement with educational partners that are both in statute and part of the LCAP template. Again, we welcome you, anyone who is joining us now. We welcome you to our LCAP virtual workshop. This is the second in our workshop series. Our next workshop we will hold on January 27th. That will be a bit of a longer workshop because we're going to be looking at the LCAP template, goals and actions, and the budget overview for parents. Oops. Sorry about that. I have a sensitive mouse here. And then before we do move into the next section, we do like to always take a moment to ground in the work that we do and really realign and recommit to the intent of this work. And we know that state and federal compliance and accountability is an attempt to operationalize equity and inclusion through policies and practices. While these systems may be imperfect, we utilize the guidelines to support educational engagement and access for all. And this really helps us focus on the intent versus impact, and that what we say does matter and what we are communicating to our educational partners does matter. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Gracie Estrella, Jerry Lopez, and Jeff Schmidt, to give us some information about best practices for meaningful engagement with educational partners.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Carrie, for that. So as Carrie grounded us into our commitment to the work and operationalizing equity and inclusion, we also wanted to ground you into the principles of the LCAP. So the why, the legislative intent, to increase local flexibility for addressing the needs of students and families, to increase transparency between LEAs and its educational partners and to provide opportunities for ongoing continuous improvement. And those principles are called out as for our LEAs level improvement that is based on multiple measures of success, continuing to centralize equity inclusive of additional funding for the three main groups of low-income students, English learners, and/or foster youth, and also to paying attention to the requirement of increased or improved services to proportion to increase in funding. In that, it's also stated with subsidiarity, social and political issues should be dealt with at the local level. So making sure that we're taking into our local context and keeping that in mind as we make these decisions. And that the approach necessitates transparency and collaboration with educational partners. So how do we create those moments of transparency and where we can communicate with our educational partners? Next slide, please. The process. The process is outlined into two buckets, the bucket of consultation and the bucket of review and comment. For the bucket of consultation, it is to take place first with your district leadership in review of the dashboard, as well as any conducted local needs assessments that you've done, such as surveys, empathy interviews, etc. And from there, moving into sharing those results with selected educational partners, as well as then sharing the drafting of goals and actions based on that feedback. And moving into the review and comment stage, where it becomes a more formal presentation of the LCAP and annual update to, again, the statutory required parent advisory groups for review and comment. And we'll go into detail who those parent groups are. Many of you are already familiar since you've written this piece before, and we will review just to review what has remained the same. But from there, also guarantee that if your superintendent receives any comments, that the superintendent responds in writing. Many of you have been very good about that in the past, so it's not as if it's new news, but we are taking the time to go through the cycle for review. And then once that has occurred, then holding at least one public hearing to solicit recommendation and comments from the general public. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to Jerry Lopez, who's going to talk to you about some tips for soliciting educational partners into the conversation and how to level up on some of those conversations. Jerry?
Thank you, Gracie, and welcome everybody. So as you engage the usual suspects that Gracie just detailed, your parent groups, your student groups, your DLAC, and other groups that you need to are spelled out. The current process is actually asking you to go see that as the floor and engage other groups of stakeholders, actually not stakeholders, educational partners beyond that. So they call that this is the floor right now, and we want you to consider the above the floor. So we'll go into a little bit more detail of who those groups might be, but we also want you to keep in mind that as you meet with these different groups, you should be actually seeing them for the benefit that they bring to you in meeting your goals and objectives as far as dealing with the LCAP goals that you will have established. So keep in mind that with some of them, some of these groups, you will be coordinating. Coordinating is the simplest form of teamwork. And I use the example of working with your library, for example, who might say, hey, we have a summer school program. We would love your children to come and engage in that. And so this summer school announcement might come in the form of either an email or might be in the form of a flyer that you might just want to make available. So this is the simplest form of coordination. They have a program, you want to take your children, take your students, take your families to take a benefit of that program, and you invite them through a very simple coordination effort. A little bit more complicated is when you cooperate with an entity or an educational partner. And the word says it, cooperation, you're literally operating at the same time, perhaps even in the same site. And this might take the form of some of your sites hosting, for example, YMCA or Boys and Girls Clubs that are doing their own funded, their own personnel, tutoring programs or after school care programs. And this is happening a lot because of the ELO efforts that we have to extend childcare to extended hours. And so literally you're cooperating with these people. They're cooperating on your side and you're still carrying out your program. And so this will require a little bit more of a complicated and a little bit more time and effort. And this should be documented. And then you have collaboration, and the collaboration aspect is when you have actually an entity that is working with you to actually come up with a brand new program that will now take place, and it's created and it's dovetailed and it's completely co-funded and co-elaborated. And this is the ultimate highest level of complexity. And I'm thinking here, if one of your goals, for example, is that dealing with an aspect of, let's say, disproportionality, you're going to need to really work a lot with the SELPAs, or if another goal dictates that you work with another local partner or a county partner, it's going to really be reflected in that engagement process, and the documentation is going to have to show it. If I can go to the next slide now. And so here is, okay, so I'm going to be engaging these educational partners. Who gets to decide? And here we base ourselves on Dr. Elena Aguilar's Art of Coaching. She has these 4 levels of empowerment, of decision making. The last one doesn't pertain to us, but when you look at the first one, this many times used to be because of necessity, lack of staffing, or just this work overload that we all seem to suffer from at times. This is where one LCAP LEA administrator team, or perhaps just one LCAP administrator, absconds. They kind of hide themselves behind a door. They go home sometimes, and they come up with an LCAP plan. It's very fluid. It's complete. However, not a lot of people were considered because of a need. Not a lot of people take part in the actual collaboration and the process of coming up with this. We want to try and avoid that as much as possible. And in fact, because of the way the LCAP is written this time, and because of the prompt systems that we're going to be using later on, describing to you, it will require that you actually meet with these groups to consult and then share that accountability. And so what you have here is what we would like you to really focus on is a level 2 or a level 3 decision and level of empowerment. One of them, the level 2, for example, is LCAP administrators gain input into the educational partners before deciding upon the LCAP plan, which means you meet with these partners ahead of time and you gain that consultation. As the process snake was showing you this, once you present to them, this is what our goals and objectives, our dashboard information, and our metrics are. And then you engage them. How can you help us meet the goals that these measurements and data dictate? So the level 2 is when you have an actual, the LCAP team, and we hope it's a team. I know that staffing is short in many districts, but we hope that we can come up with a very supportive team. You engage through consultation, and then you could even lead into level 3, which is the educational partners decide upon LCAP plans and offer a recommendation to the LCAP administrators. And there are many LCAP administrators that can participate in this. For example, if you have WAS teams, school site councils, school leadership teams, district leadership teams, ELACs or DLACs, there are already groups that exist that have some of this language, have some of these thoughts and processes. In fact, their own contract obligations, whether it be state or federal, already have it in them that they have to have an advisory role. So capture this so that they can then participate fully at a level 2 and a level 3 of responsibility. If we can go on to the next slide. And so why do we want to do this? Because there's benefits to engaging educational partners. And the next slide is going to deal with just the ones that we have written here, the usual suspects, as we call them. No, engaging as many people, because we're trying to get from their collaboration, from their wherewithal, from their purpose, benefits to engage to meeting our LCAP goals. And here, you know that research does show that the more that we engage more people in these kind of plannings and goal setting, there's a better understanding of the current needs and possible solutions. This is a powerful tool against the myth busting that, oh, schools are just administratively top heavy. They don't know what they're doing. It's a simple job to educate children, and they're just somehow not doing it correctly, or they don't know how to do it. When you bring in as many people from the community, you welcome them into the decision making. Not only do you help them understand, hey, the task is very complex and we really need your help. Not only will your involvement give us more of a likelihood of outcomes, but they begin to see the arduousness of meeting the challenge of establishing goals and really dealing with the current situations of the student data and trying to move that data forward. The hope is that as we bring in more stakeholders, I'm sorry, I keep using that word, as we bring in more educational partners, that not only will they begin to understand the severity and really the challenge that we face, but we'll start building trust with them, especially as we let them know we feel that you have a part in helping us meet this challenge. And then what we really hope is for future and stronger and longer lasting partnerships, that we will have more and more people that will join our efforts as we confront these, as we establish our LCAP and meet the challenge of the goals set through it. And then for me, the last section is the following slide, Carrie. Who else can we include? I mean, we already have a list that Gracie detailed for you at the first step. These are the educational partners that have to be meaningfully engaged, but who else can you engage? Many districts have migrant education programs or have California state preschool programs or have California childcare centers, or people who are going to be coming on to our sites, boys and girls clubs, private childcare providers, even YMCAs that are going to be helping us meet certain goals for childcare and other aspects that might be part of our goals. Most of these groups already have advisory expectations within their roles, PACs, parent advisory committees that they need to hold. So make sure that you go and you establish a process, and we'll talk about this more when we deal with the prompts, that captures this information, that captures their voice. Special education PTAs, many times special education, especially parents, have a very nuanced set of needs, the parents themselves. And so several districts have started PTAs where they exclusively meet with these groups and then capture their voice and their expectations and their help in meeting goals. Business organizations, you can do either roundtables or surveys of those existing around you. Many of them do have benefits in coming and supporting, many times in a variety of very liquid ways. Don't forget student BIPOC forums and surveys. There's a great power in meeting with the students, not just dealing on state, federal, even school or district level data analyses, but meeting with them face to face and establishing that trust so that it can open up and letting you know what is it that they're facing. It might really have an effect on you, on the way that you establish your goals and your expectations. Medical, dental, mental health, food pantries, forum of service in your area. How can they come in and really give that holistic approach to meeting the needs of our families? Because most of these families, if the data reflects one need, it's because there's many other underlying needs. Contact your Rotary, church organizations, foundations in the area. Many of them are very interested in either providing liquid support or even volunteers to provide for after school or tutoring services. And then also many of you guys are already involved with higher education collaboratives, whether it be for a dual enrollment purposes for your students, and they can help you who is actually accessing these dual enrollment programs, and can we improve it to other students and establish a goal for that? And then also teacher preparation. Many of you already work with several universities and other higher education institutions in the area. At this point, let me pass it on to Jeff, who's going to do the next portion.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate that. While we're thinking about all this, the overencompassing picture of engagement with all of our educational partners, Jerry talked a lot about collaboration and cooperation, all the different groups that we can be engaging with, and documenting how we do that process throughout the year, how they're and participating in our programs and providing input. Later in the presentation, we'll be talking about how that engagement and the information you're gathering from all your educational partners influences the development of your LCAP. This is the first year that we have a dashboard again. It's going to be released any day now, if not this week, maybe next week. For fingers crossed. The dashboard does look a little bit different this year, and part of what you share in the LCAP template itself is how you engage educational partners. And if you are used to sharing the dashboard previously before the pandemic as part of your data sharing, the dashboard looks different this year. So this slide has some resources from the California Department of Education to help you engage your educational partners, and they call it flyers for parents here, to help them understand why the dashboard looks different this year. And these are really helpful tools for you to, if they're going to be looking at the dashboard once it's out, that's going to be a part of your educational partnership engagement. So I encourage you to look at these. Carrie, do you mind opening up the first one here at the top, the toolkit? So this is the website itself. It's a summary and an overview that talks about the differences and what's been happening in the state. There's a lot of information here. I don't want to go over it specifically in detail, but I wanted you to have this as part on your radar as part of your tools for what you might be sharing. And then if you could just briefly, oh, here it is right there. The flyers for parents are what we are seeing, and there's flyers for educators, talking points and additional resources right there. There's a whole list of flyers for parents here that they show you getting to know the dashboard, the state measures, current reporting year information, how to view performance in school district data, exploring equity, etc. So this page is kind of a one-stop shop for all the new information and how things have been updated. So I appreciate you sharing this page. And then the three here are what they shared, the CDE shared recently in their 4-part series of the new dashboard trainings. And these are the ones that are also on that website, part of the flyers that are also listed on the website we just showed you. So this is a great tool for you to explain why the dashboard looks different, how to interpret and read the dashboard as you're sharing data that's in addition to any local data or street data or other measurements that you're sharing with your educational partners. Next slide, please. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to educational partner engagement, not only do you report on how and discuss how that engagement helped develop your goals and actions and the LCAP itself, but there's part of the dashboard that actually reflects that parent engagement and that in community engagement. And this is just a quick overview for the dashboard coordinators or the accountability folks at your district. There are 2 options for uploading that information into the dashboard. The first option is a survey. If the LVA administers a local survey to parents and guardians, educational partners, in at least one grade within each grade span at the LEA, the LA will summarize the following in the text box provided in the dashboard. So there's 3 prompts here. The key findings from the survey related to seeking input from parents and guardians in the school and district decision making. The key findings from the school survey related to promoting parental participation in programs, and why the LEA chose to select best selected survey that you used, and whether the findings related to the goals established for other LCFF priorities, and whether it relates to those other LCFF priorities, not just priority 3, which is parent and family engagement. There's another option too, in the next 2 slides, and this one, local measures summarizing the following in a text box. So these are narrative summaries, and there's 3 here. So the first, the LEA's progress on at least one measure, I'll show you the measures in the next slide, related to seeking input from parents and guardians in school and district decision making. The LEA's progress on at least one measure related to promoting parental participation in programs, and why the LEA chose those selected measures. Those measures are on the next slide. So there's A and B here. So the A selection, seeking input in school district decision making, and the B is participation in programs. So for A, a measure of teacher and administrator participation in professional development opportunities related to engaging parents and guardians in decision making, or a measure of the participation by parents and guardians in trainings that also involve school districts and staff to build capacity in working collaboratively, like Jerry talked about earlier, the collaboration aspect. Another one, measuring the parent and guardian participation in meetings of the local governing board and or advisory committees. And there's lots of parent committees. Connecting all those parent committees and advisory board meetings and even local governing board meetings to the LCAP process is really powerful. And then under the B category here, participation in programs, a measure of whether school sites have had access to interpretation and translation services to allow parents and guardians to participate fully in your educational programs and individual meetings with school staff related to their child's education. Number 2 here, measuring whether school sites provide trainings or workshops for parents and guardians that are linked to student learning and or social emotional development and growth. And then finally, a measure of whether school and district staff have completed professional development on effective parent-guardian engagement in at least 2 school years. So those are the things that you'll be reporting into the dashboard that we would see next year as part of your state priority 3 data. So there's a lot of different buckets here when it comes to engaging our community. So it's not just getting input on our programs throughout the year. It's not just the development of the LCAP, but it's also part of our dashboard data. And that's what I wanted to share with you today. So with that, I'm going to pass it back over to
And
Carrie.
before we go ahead and do that, I'm going to bring us back to some attention to the chat. There's some communication that's been going on. One resource that I do want to address and bring light to is the dashboard resource that was dropped in the chat by Jenny that provides the dashboard resources in multiple languages. So calling out that resource, and also a question by Shannon. Are we going to get a new LCAP template? Does anyone know when DTS will have the 2023 template available?
Thank you for asking that question, Shannon. We have heard that there are no changes to the LCAP template for the 23-24 LCAP. So they have actually, and I've included it in this workshop in one of the slides, they have actually already posted everything for the 23-24 LCAP. They still have the same template from the previous year because there are no changes. There are some adjustments to some of the requirements related to our parent advisory committee, but as far as the LCAP and the instructions, there are absolutely no changes that are coming down. And I have a link to that website with the screenshot so that you can see what it looks like right now. Does that answer your question, Shannon?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then there was there was another question. So next year's dashboard will have all those extra questions.
So Jeff, can you answer that question about those about the educational engagement with educational partner questions on the dashboard?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. Just a moment, I'm going to look for it.
I think it's in reference to the previous slide about additional questions.
Can you read me the question, Gracie? Do you have it in front of you?
It just says, so next year's dashboards will have all those extra questions. And so.
Yes. So there's 2 options for reporting your parent and guardian engagement into the dashboard. And these are the 2 options described in these 3 slides, option 1 and 2. And there's prompts for the dashboard coordinators to input that information into the dashboard. It's part of the sort of local measure, if you will, related to state priority 3. I hope that answered the question.
Okay. And Gracie, is there anything else that we need to address or any follow-up questions?
No follow-up questions, just some doc tracking is working on updating it. I'm not sure what that means, but there's some work being done.
Okay.
On DTS.
Okay. Okay, and when it comes to DTS, we will certainly learn more. We can certainly be in communication with DTS. We are going to share a little bit of information about the LCAP template, but again, we have been told by CDE, by school services, that there are no changes to the 2023-24 LCAP template. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us into the requirements for our engagement with educational partners as part of our statute. And before we do go through these slides, because there is quite a bit of information there, we want to remind everybody that we recognize that the statute defines the floor and not the ceiling. We recognize that many of our LEA partners go above and beyond what's written in statute as part of that requirement for our engagement with educational partners, but that we also realize that there is an intent that was tried, that the legislation tried to capture within statute and created some of these guidelines for us to go above and beyond. So before we do jump into the very specific requirements related to our engagement with our educational partners, I do want to just reference back to what Gracie was speaking about or speaking of in the beginning of this workshop, which is those buckets of engagement. We're going to use those buckets as we're going through this component, looking at the consultation requirements as one bucket. What are we doing before we're drafting and writing our draft LCAP, before we put pen to paper or get into DTS and start really completing the template? Then what do we do when we've got that graph? What are the requirements related to the reviewing and the commenting on our, in this case, 23-24 LCAP, moving it forward, and then pushing it up for adoption? With regards to that first bucket, that consultation requirement, statute does require that school districts and COEs consult with the following educational partners during that consultation of the development of the LCAP. So this is written into statute, into ed code. So teachers, principals, administrators, other school personnel, local bargaining units of the LEA, parents, students, and SELPA must be consulted with by our school districts and COEs. For charter schools, we have similar requirements. Statute requires charter schools to consult with the following educational partners: teachers, principals, administrators, other school personnel, parents, and students. If there are local bargaining units available, certainly can consult with those as applicable, as well as SELPA. We do want to spend a moment speaking a little bit more to the student consultation. Statute did define a little bit about what that student consultation is. So what does it mean to consult with students? To consult with students means a process to enable students, including students who are low income, English learners, foster youth, and students from numerically significant student groups, to review and comment on the development of the LCAP. This process may include surveys of students, forums with students, student advisory committees, or meeting with student government bodies or other groups representing students about their education. This student consultation is really where we are getting the opinion and the feelings of our students about their education. What are their needs? How are they experiencing their education? This is not a requirement to take the LCAP, put it in front of our student groups, and ask them to review the document and give us feedback. This is really where we're engaging in those empathy interviews, and we're really understanding how our students are experiencing our systems and processes of education. Once we've completed the consultation, we've shared some of our dashboard data, we've shared our local data, we've shared sort of that street level data with all of our various educational partnerships and those groups, then we can move into the review and comment phase when we're actually putting information into our DTS template or our LCAP template, or putting pen to paper. So before adopting the LCAP, school districts and COEs must share the LCAP with the Parent Advisory Committee, and if applicable, to its English Learner Parent Advisory Committee. As Gracie mentioned before, the superintendent is required by statute to respond in writing to these comments received from these committees. So giving them an opportunity to review our document, our draft. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about parent advisory committees. The governing board of a school district or COE must establish a parent advisory committee based on the ed code. And the committee is composed of a majority of parents, including parents of low income, English learner, and foster youth students. We do have a new requirement for the 23-24 LCAP as part of AB 181. And that means that this is for this year, the LCAP that we're going to be developing in the spring. So this AB 181, this bill would revise requirements regarding the composition of those parent advisory committees to, among other things, require the inclusion of parents or legal guardians of pupils with disabilities currently enrolled in those schools. Previously, this was a best practice, or as we were working with SELPA or some special education groups, including those parents or legal guardians of pupils with disabilities. This is now a requirement as part of AB 181. So for this 23-24 LCAP, we want to make sure that we're including those individuals in our parent advisory committees. Another thing to consider looking ahead for our parent advisory committees as part of Senate Bill 997. So we do just want to kind of give you guys a heads up. This is not a requirement for this year, but beginning July 1st, 2024, the governing board of a school district serving middle school or high school pupils and a county superintendent of schools to either include at least 2 pupils as full members of the parent advisory committee to serve for a renewable term of 1 full school year, or establish a student advisory committee as specified. So there are those 2 options there. We will certainly be providing more information about this as we get closer to July 1st, 2024. In this second description here, there is some information, some more specifics about what school districts and county superintendents of schools are required to do as they include or meet this requirement. And we will certainly, again, be giving more information about this moving forward. Also, when we're thinking about our English learner parent advisory committees, we know that based in Ed Code, if the enrollment of the school district or COE includes at least 15% English learners, and the school district or COE enrolls at least 50 students who are English learners, the school district or COE must establish an English learner parent advisory committee. We know that this varies depending on the needs of the LEAs, but we have included here the very specific language because we know that this may shift given current context for meeting this requirement. Another requirement as part of the reviewing and commenting process, school districts and COEs are required to provide members of the public with the opportunity to submit written comments regarding the action and expenditures proposed in the LCAP. We need to make sure that notifications are made using the most efficient method of notification possible, and school districts and COEs are required to ensure that written notifications are translated into the primary language of any student population that make up 15% or more of the LEA students who speak a primary language other than English. Additionally, statute states that the LCAP should also be shared with, and LEA should request input from, school site level advisory groups as applicable to facilitate alignment between school site and district level goals and actions. As Jerry was mentioning earlier, this could include your school site councils, your English Learner Advisory Council, student advisory groups, PTO, etc. To coincide with this requirement, we want to remind that a school district or COE is required to review the school plans for student achievement, your SIPSA, as applicable, for schools within the district or COE to ensure that specific actions included in the LCAP are consistent with strategies included in the school's school plan for student achievement, SIPSAs. Next, before we do go into adoption, our kind of last big component for that reviewing and comment option is before a school district or COE adopts the LCAP, it must hold at least 1 public hearing to solicit recommendations and comments from members of the public regarding the specific actions and expenditures proposed to be included in the LCAP. We need to remember that the agenda for the public hearing must be posted at least 72 hours in advance and must include the location of where the LCAP will be available for public inspection. After reviewing and commenting, and after we've taken those comments and we've included them in our draft or maybe revised our draft, we then move into adoption. So first, the governing board of a school district or COE must adopt the LCAP at a public meeting on or before July 1st of each year. Some things to keep in mind for school districts or COEs is that this meeting must be held after, but not on the same day as the public hearing. The meeting must be the same meeting at which the governing board of the school district or COE adopts the budget, and the school district or COE must also report its CA dashboard local indicators at the same meeting. For our charter schools, there are some similar requirements. The governing body of a charter school must hold a public hearing to adopt the LCAP on or before July 1st of each year. At this meeting, the governing body of the charter school must update the goals and annual actions to achieve those goals identified in the charter petition. At this meeting, the governing body of the charter school must adopt the budget, and the charter school must also report on the California dashboard local indicators at this same meeting. The one difference between this meeting, the adoption meeting for charter schools, and the adoption requirement for our school districts or COEs is that for charter schools, there is no requirement for the charter school to hold 2 separate meetings for a public hearing and for the LCAP adoption. Certainly a best practice, but not a requirement in statute for charter schools. And then the last thing before we do a quick dive into the template for the 3 prompts related to engagement with educational partners, we want to reiterate that there are no changes to the 23-20-24 LCAP template. You see here a screenshot of when you go to the CDE webpage, what you will see. You see the adopted LCAP template was updated November 4th, 2021. That's because there have been no changes. So they do not need to add a new template. They do have in there the 2023-24 action table instructions. They also have below this what you'll see on the webpage, the way in which we should publish, the order in which we should publish and submit our LCAP to our webpage and to our COE. But there are no changes to the 23-24 LCAP template. There's also a link here to that webpage. And because there are no changes, this really gives us an opportunity to slow down and really think about what the information that we are communicating throughout that document and the actions that we are taking to engage our educational partners. And now I'm going to pass it back over to Jerry to walk us quickly through the prompts in the LCAP template.
Thank you, Carrie. And as we have been saying all along, what the LCAP is seeking is meaningful engagement of our educational partners. And so the LCAP is written in such a manner, as you can see, with 3 areas of reporting upon 3 prompts that I'll go through briefly. Now, when you see the template itself does not have the instructions. Can you go to the next slide, Carrie? Thank you. You need to make sure that you go to the instructions, read them carefully, because they do carry the full force of the law, which means that we will be reviewing your LCAP and looking at these instructions to make sure that you met the stipulations in these instructions as you reported on your 3 prompts. So as you progress from one prompt to the other, and the prompts are really designed in a 1, 2, 3 through line process, so that you'll be able to tell us the story, the narrative of how you meaningfully engaged your partners, your educational partners. And once again, you can have just the basic floor. However, if anybody that can help you benefit in some way or another and help you gain access and progress towards meeting those goals, be thinking about who you want to engage. It might be new partners this year that you're going to be seeking, but is it really anybody who can get you to that goal? Let's go to the first prompt. The first prompt, it really is a summary of the process used to engage the educational partners. How did you go about it? Did you send out an online survey? How did you go about identifying them? Are these people who you've been working with? Do you have a history with them? Are they new members that you're seeing as entities that can actually help you meet these goals? Did you hold a roundtable? It might be important and interesting to actually gather all these partners if they come from like categories. As we said, the medical area, the food insecurity area, or the tutoring areas, those who are going to be helping with your ELAP, establishing your childcare and your extended childcare goals. So you might want to actually survey them or create a roundtable or anything else that you've been doing in the past that has worked for you, or as you work and cross-pollinate with other districts in the area, what have other LEAs done, other districts done that has worked for them as far as engaging them and getting your story of meeting their support and mutually benefiting from each other's support. So it needs to be a narrative that describes what the engagement process was like and how you met your obligations to consult with your educational partners. And then also a timeline. So if you want to start with a roundtable of sorts at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of this process, and then carry it on to an individual approach to meeting with each one of them, or it might be a survey that you do. So you just have to describe how it is that you're going to engage them in this particular first prompt. All right, the second prompt is a summary of the feedback provided by specific educational partners. Here you might be looking at what are their grant or funding availabilities or limitations. What are their actual services that they could provide? What is their targeted clientele? Does it match one of the groups that is being identified in your goals? So this is a wonderful way to just create really almost a list of resources, a catalog of available providers that can benefit you and help you meet your goals. So in this case, you need to summarize the feedback provided by the educational partners and it must specify ideas or trends and say these four can meet this particular aspect. Once again, the food insufficiency and insecurity, or the tutoring programs that some of these children, the summer available services that might be provided. Number 3. So as you can see, we go from number 1, which is who are they? What do they bring to the table? To 2, how is it that they can, what can they provide? What is their availability? What aspect do they support? What goal do they support? And then number 3, they actually want to see a description of the aspects of the LCAP upon which they can influence, which means where can I tag them into? Where can this educational partner actually partner with me? We can benefit from what they have to provide and influence this goal and its outcomes. So here's what we want to see: a clear description of how the engagement is going to influence the development of the LCAP. Where can we tie them in? What goal can they support? And then the second part is must describe aspects of the LCAPs that were influenced by or developed in response to it. Because this partner came and told us, I have this service available during the summer, now we're going to create this summer goal. That's the kind of information they're going to want to see here. Here is where I would recommend that you put in these are the partners with whom we can coordinate. The library is going to coordinate with a reading program during the summer, and YMCA is going to cooperate with us by running some of their programs, the after-school programs, or even summer programs on site. And then the collaboration is in regards to parent engagement. We're going to work in collaboration with the DLAC to create a series of parent university opportunities for our Latino parents, our recent immigrant parents, or various language groups that are identified. So as you can see, you will be required to come up with a prompt 1, 2, and 3. It really is a 1, 2, 3 through line of how is it that you meaningfully engage your educational partners.
Thank you, Jerry. And before we do turn the microphone over to Mary Young, I'd like to pause. Gracie, are there any questions in the chat box?
No questions that came up, just a request for collaboration.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to our colleague, Mary Young.
Thanks, Carrie. Thank you all for having us here today. I just wanted to talk briefly about how you might consider including your special education partners as you think about including education partners in your LCAP this year. So next slide, please. So this is not new, but it is something that we reiterate that the SELPA is here to collaborate with all of you as you develop your LCAPs and considering how you are addressing the needs of your students with disabilities. I do want to highlight, though, that we do receive some questions sometimes about the annual assurances support plan. That is not an actual AB 181 actually amended that ed code to extend the deadline for the annual assurances support plan. So you actually do not have to do that component of the LCAP until the 2026-2027 school year. So that's a few years out. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I wanted to ensure that or go back to is really the why of including our special education partners. And that is the idea that our students are part of the whole. And so our students are part of the Gen Ed group of students first and foremost. But one of the things that has happened in the past is that the needs of these students have not been called out as much in the LCAP, and potentially all the work that you have been doing to support our students with disabilities has not been identified and or potentially highlighted. So that's another reason to potentially take a look at how you're documenting your interactions with these the parents and families of students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So these special education partners are actually a part of your parent advisory committee this year. For some of you, this has been already part of your practice. And so as Dr. Lopez had indicated, as far as the 3 prompts go in terms of how you're capturing the interaction with families and parents of students with disabilities, these are considerations that potentially should be captured in the engaging educational partners area of your LCAP. If you would click, please, Gracie. So some ideas about who you might include in your parent advisory committee if you don't have them already are parents and families of students with disabilities. Click. Your special education district advisory committee or your CDAC members. And these members, typically, if you have some LEAs call this your special education PTA. They actually might have members that could attend some of your parent advisory committee meetings. For some, these people are actually included in other committee meetings that you already have. I would just highlight those participants in this section without actually needing to call out the people involved in terms of indicating or potentially giving up confidentiality of these partners. The last group that you may want to consider is groups that have been working with you on your CSACE plans or your SIM plan. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is something you may want to check in with your special education director or your student services director if you are involved in any special education improvement monitoring. Those individuals may be participating in and supporting the work around improving services for students with disabilities and could definitely give you input as part of your educational partners in special education. So this year, the SELPA consultation consists of our initial meeting with the entire LCAP team, with the San Mateo County Office of Education, your district, consultation for alignment of the SIM process and the CSACE plans if you are involved in that. We are also reviewing the LCAP plans prior to your board approval, along with the SIM-COE LCAP team, and we'll provide feedback to you about areas of engagement with your parent advisory committees, any areas of alignment with any of your special education plans, and particular goals and actions that address areas affecting students with disabilities. Additionally, you may also want individualized meetings, and we are available to do that as well if you want us to sit down and point out areas in which we can provide that consultation. Again, it is part of the work that we are doing, the SELPA consultation, so please do reach out to us.
Okay, thank you, Mary. We appreciate you always being here with you and your team. And does anybody have, or Grace, are there any questions in the chat for Mary?
Sorry, it took me a bit to find the mute button. No questions came on through.
All right, thank you. And so today we provided you all with a lot of information related to engagement with educational partners. Some of it may have been new, some of it may have been reminders. And we are now moving to the end of our workshop. We do have a summary of supports just to remind you of. Again, please feel free to reach out to the SMCO LCAP team. Always an appreciation of the work that we do across the County Office of Education to support the process of developing the LCAP, implementing the LCAP, monitoring and measuring. So you'll see here on these slides, these are live links. I provided this the information to the LCAP team previously. And then we also want to remind everybody that we do have our next workshop on January 27th. It will be a 2-hour workshop where we will do a deeper dive into goals and actions, the 23-24 LCAP template with no changes, but we do want to spend some time kind of recalibrating and then looking at the budget overview for parents. So with that, we're going to stop the recording.